All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to tackle a huge idea, something that's baked into the very fabric of America, the American dream. So, let's get right into it.
So, when I say the words, the American dream, what pops into your head? I bet for a lot of us, it's this, right? The house, the perfectly manicured yard, the smiling family. It's that classic image of having finally made it. And, it's a picture that's been sold to us for generations.
But what if that's not it? What if this whole image, this checklist of stuff we're supposed to acquire, isn't the real American dream? What if the whole idea started out as something way deeper, something much bigger? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into. Okay, so to find the real answer, we've got to go back to the source. And you might be thinking, okay, the Founding Fathers, the 1700s, right? But nope. The phrase the American dream was actually first put into words during the Great Depression. Pretty surprising, huh?
And here it is. This is the first ever definition, written by a historian named James Truslow Adams all the way back in 1931. Now read it carefully. Notice what's not in there. There's nothing about a house or a car or how much money you make. It's all about a richer, fuller life. It's about opportunity for everyone. It was a dream for a better society.
And get this, Adams was really clear about this. He actually warned people not to let this dream just become a mad dash for material stuff. He was worried that if we all got obsessed with just cars and wages, we'd completely miss the point. The real goal was to create a society where people respected each other.
So the big question is, if that was the original blueprint, how on earth did we end up with the white picket fence? Well, to figure that out, we have to take a quick trip back in time, because the idea of the dream was around for a long time, way before it ever got a name.
Way back in the 1600s, you could say it started as a spiritual dream, people coming here for religious freedom. Then in 1776, it became a political dream, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Fast forward to the 1800s, and it's all about the frontier, owning your own piece of land, being self-sufficient. And then, as millions of immigrants arrived, it transformed again into that classic rags to riches story, the idea that if you just work hard enough, you'll get rich. Do you see the pattern? With each step, it seems to move a little bit further away from community and a little closer to individual wealth.
All right, so this whole evolution really hits a critical point right after World War II. I mean, think about it. The country had just been through the absolute trauma of the Great Depression and a massive war. People were desperate for stability, for comfort, for normalcy. And that's when the dream really started to narrow, becoming something very specific, and for a lot of people, kind of suffocating.
This is the moment suburbia becomes the poster child for the whole thing. The American dream wasn't some lofty, abstract idea anymore. Nope, it became a checklist, a literal checklist. Get the house, get the secure job, get the car, get the brand new fridge. It was a tangible, physical promise of safety and prosperity.
But not everyone was buying it. You had writers and thinkers, people like the playwright Arthur Miller, who started to raise a red flag. They were looking at this new version of the dream and seeing a dark side. They started to argue that the pursuit of property had totally taken over the pursuit of happiness. And they began to ask a really heavy question. What is the real cost of chasing this dream?
I mean, look at the difference here. It's night and day, right? The original dream, Adam's dream, was all about building a better community, together. But this new post-war dream, it was all about individual success. It turned society into this big competition where your neighbor wasn't someone you worked with, but someone you had to beat to get to the next rung on the ladder.
And this is where you see the real conflict start to bubble up. The pressure to check off all those boxes on the list, the house, the car, the salary, it just became intense. So intense that it could push good people to do bad things, to cut corners, to sacrifice their morals and value profit over people, all in the name of achieving the dream.
Okay, so let's just pull this all together for a second. The American dream starts out as this big idea about spiritual freedom in community. Then it shifts to being about land and independence. Then it becomes about climbing the economic ladder through hard work. And finally, it gets boiled down to a checklist of things to own. You have to wonder, did we lose something important in that translation?
Which really leaves us with a huge question, one that's just as relevant today. In our own lives, in our society right now, have we lost that original bigger vision? Has chasing after property, The house, the car, all this stuff completely replaced the real pursuit of happiness. It's definitely something to think about. So what does the American dream really mean to you?
We've all heard of the American dream, right? The promise of a better life. But what happens when that promise, when it becomes a poison? That's the really haunting question at the heart of Arthur Miller's work. And today, we're going to dive right into his brilliant and, let's be honest, often brutal world to see what we can find.
You know, it's supposed to be this promise of prosperity, right? The chance to leave something better for your kids. But what happens when that promise just curdles? When chasing that dream turns into a destructive obsession? Yeah, this is the territory Arthur Miller just lays bare for us.
So, Arthur Miller. People often call him the great moral conscience of the American dream. And it's not like he was against the dream itself, not at all. But what he was absolutely fascinated by was how twisting that dream, corrupting it, could just tear a family apart from the inside out.
All right, so in two of his most famous plays, and get this, they were written only 2 years apart, Miller shows us two totally different ways the American dream can spiral into an absolute nightmare.
Okay, so on one side, you've got All My Sons. Here, the dream is all about building something you can touch, you know? A real physical business to pass down to your kids. But then, on the other side, there's Death of a Salesman, and the dream shifts to something more modern and kind of insidious. It's all about success through personality, through just appearing to be important. We're talking two very different kinds of poison here.
So, let's break this down a bit. Look at Joe Keller in All My Sons. His core goal? Security, ownership, something real. And how does he get it? Through this brutal, cutthroat pragmatism. His symbol is the factory, solid, concrete. Now contrast that with Willy Loman. What's his goal? It's just to be popular, to be well-liked. His method is pure performance, total delusion. And his symbol? The diamond. It's this fantasy of striking it rich overnight with zero real work.
So, what's the price you pay for chasing these broken dreams? Miller is crystal clear on this one. The cost? It's nothing less than your soul.
Okay, let's start with All My Sons. Joe Keller sees the dream as this giant fortress. His only job, as he sees it, is to protect his family inside those walls. And he'll do absolutely anything to the people on the outside to make that happen. It's this total us against the world mindset. But here's the brilliant, tragic catch. He builds that fortress on a foundation of lies and crime. And by doing that, he ends up poisoning everything and everyone inside the walls. That obsession with material stuff, the paid-off house, the successful business, it forces him to just toss his morality out the window. And that rot, it ultimately destroys the very family he was trying to protect. Now, Willy Loman's tragedy in Death of a Salesman, it's a whole different beast. For him, the dream isn't a fortress. It's a performance, a show. Willy has completely, 100% bought into this modern idea that personality is something you can sell, that success isn't really earned, it's just performed.
And the result is just devastating. Willy chases the appearance of success so hard that he completely loses who he is. He's haunted by this myth of quick, easy money, and he tells so many lies about how popular and successful he is that eventually he can't even tell the difference between the man he actually is and the somebody he's pretending to be. He literally erases his own identity.
So, in both of these stories, everything comes to a head when the fathers try to pass these twisted dreams down to their sons. And the sons, well, in their own ways, they just refuse to take on that poisoned legacy. But the way this conflict plays out is really different in each play. For the Kellers, it's a moral fight, right? It's about actions and consequences, right and wrong. For the Lomans, it's something way deeper. It's an existential conflict. It's about who you are at your very core.
Let's look at Chris Keller in All My Sons. He's a true idealist. So when he finds out his father's whole business, his entire legacy, is built on blood money, he just rejects it, flat out, on purely moral grounds. For him, there's just no way he can profit from a crime that killed people.
Now, Biff Loman's rebellion is totally different. It's not about morality for him. It's about identity. He finally breaks free by rejecting his father's huge delusions and just accepting that he's an ordinary guy. He doesn't want to be some big-shot tycoon. He just wants to be himself. And that simple, powerful act of self-acceptance is something his father, Willy, could never, ever do. Okay, so when you put these two incredible tragedies side by side, what is Arthur Miller's final warning to us about the American dream? What's the bottom line?
Well, here it is, plain and simple. In All My Sons, the dream gets twisted into pure greed. You know, that old school corruption of hurting society for your own financial gain. But in Death of a Salesman, the dream morphs into narcissism, a really modern post-war obsession with image and being liked, and it's so consuming that it just destroys a person from the inside out. And this is the chilling final verdict. It doesn't matter which path is taken. Whether the dream rots into greed or narcissism, Miller shows us it leads to the exact same desperate end. Both Joe Keller and Willy Loman take their own lives. It's a final, absolutely devastating statement on what happens when a dream gets disconnected from basic human values. So, that really leaves us with a question for our own time, doesn't it? When does that healthy drive for a better life cross the line? At what point does the American dream stop being a promise and start becoming a poison? I mean, Miller wrote these plays over 70 years ago, but wow, that question has never felt more urgent than it does right now.
Let's talk about the American dream. You know the idea, right? Work hard, follow the rules, and you'll find success and a good life. But what if that whole dream isn't exactly what it seems? For two of America's most brilliant writers, that dream meant two completely different and totally conflicting things.
So for a lot of people, including the famous playwright Arthur Miller, the American dream is actually a kind of trap. It's this materialistic illusion, you know, all about getting new cars and paying off the house. But in his plays, like the classic Death of a Salesman, it ultimately just crushes the soul of anyone who buys into it.
But hang on. What if the problem isn't the dream itself? What if the real tragedy is that for a whole group of people, the dream was never even on the table? What if it was a promise that was broken on purpose, right from the very beginning?
And that question, well, that brings us right to the heart of this. This is really a tale of two different visions. We're going to look at that common critique from people like Arthur Miller, and then we're going to dive into a powerful counterargument from the incredible poet of the Harlem Renaissance, Langston Hughes.
Okay, so let's get this straight because this is the key. Miller saw the dream as an internal poison, something that makes you feel like a failure from the inside out. But Hughes, he saw it as an external barrier, a locked door. So for Miller, the problem was the dream. For Hughes, the problem was the denial of that dream.
Let's start with Hughes's most famous critique, which you'll find in his incredible poem Harlem. He asks this one simple but really haunting question: what actually happens to a dream when it's just put on hold forever?
Hughes is basically arguing that you can't just deny people justice and opportunity forever without it causing a kind of spiritual rot. The delay itself is what does the damage. It creates this festering wound in the heart of a community.
And, I mean, just look at the imagery he uses here. While Miller's character, Willy Loman, is obsessed with things like a new refrigerator, Hughes uses these deeply physical, biological metaphors. Does the dream just shrivel up and lose all its life like a raisin in the sun?
He keeps going with this really unsettling image, a sore that festers. That's an injury that isn't healing, right? It's an open wound that gets infected and it poisons everything. It becomes this constant, painful reminder of a promise that was broken.
And the metaphors just get more and more powerful, more impossible to ignore. See, the dream doesn't just fade away quietly, it decays. It turns into something foul that you can't get away from, a constant, stinking reminder of what you were denied.
And this is where everything shifts. The poem moves from this quiet sadness and decay to this final, explosive warning. While Miller's characters tend to just implode under the pressure of the dream, Hughes suggests that when you defer a dream for an entire people, the result isn't just sadness. It's social upheaval. It explodes.
That idea of pressure building up leads us right into another one of Hughes's key themes, the dream as a deliberate act of exclusion. This is really the core of his amazing poem, I Too. With just these few simple lines, Hughes captures the entire reality of segregation. He's saying, look, I'm part of the American family, I'm the brother, but I'm being physically shut out from the main table, from the feast of American prosperity and equality. But here's where things get really different. Miller's characters, they're destroyed when they fail to achieve the dream. Hughes's speaker is the total opposite. He says he laughs and eats well and grows strong. Being excluded doesn't crush him. It actually builds his resolve.
And this is his defiant response. He's not asking for permission. He's just stating a fact. The American dream isn't something he has to earn or buy his way into. It's his birthright. And he's just waiting for his moment to take his rightful place at the table.
So finally, Hughes presents the dream as a project, something that has to be taken back and rebuilt by the people themselves. And he explores this whole idea in his poem, Let America Be America Again.
This line shows up again and again in the poem, and it just perfectly highlights this huge gap between the idea of America, the land of the free, and the harsh reality for so many of its people. So who are these people who've been locked out of the dream? Hughes gives us this powerful roll call: the farmer, the worker, the immigrant, the indigenous person. He argues that these are the real builders of America, the ones whose hard work created all the wealth that they were never allowed to share in.
So for Hughes, criticizing America's failures wasn't an act of betrayal at all. It was actually the ultimate act of patriotism. It was a demand to make the nation finally live up to its own founding promises, to really transform the whole system.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. We started with Miller's critique of a dream that corrupts you. Now that we've walked through Hughes's powerful countervision, let's put them side by side one last time. What we've got here are two of the most powerful voices of the 20th century, both looking at the same country, the same dream, and seeing two completely different Americas. And this table, it just lays it out so clearly. For Miller, the problem is that the dream is corrupt, and its victim is the guy who believes in it. The result is total personal collapse, and the dream itself becomes a nightmare. But for Hughes, the problem is hypocrisy. The victim is the man who's excluded. The reaction isn't collapse, it's resilience. And the dream? Well, the dream is a noble goal, something worth fighting for.
When it comes right down to it, Hughes saw the American dream like this, like a promissory note given to every single citizen. A check, but for Black Americans, that check had always come back stamped, insufficient funds. It's an incredibly powerful metaphor, one that Martin Luther King Jr. would later make famous around the world.
And that really leaves us with one final big question. Langston Hughes was writing all this decades ago, demanding that America finally make good on its promise. When you look at the world today, you just have to ask, has that check finally been cashed?